Transhumanism promises eternal digital life. It promises you to upload your soul, or rather yourself, the contents of your brain, to the digital cloud so you can roam freely in this wonderful digital heaven. But really, what they want to do is to mummify your soul. They want to mummify yourself and turn it into a data heap to harvest forevermore, while your self, in fact, gets entirely destroyed in the process because it is grounded in history itself. If there's one thinker who foresaw this sort of strange horror, it is Friedrich Nietzsche, who, of course, blamed none other than all philosophers, and especially Plato, for the problem which we face. We have in the Twilight of the Idols, the Götzendämmerung, the following section. This is Walter Kaufmann's translation. I'd like to read the whole of it. You ask me which of the philosopher's traits are really idiosyncrasies. For example, their lack of historical sense, their hatred of the very idea of becoming, their Egypticism. They think that they show their respect for a subject when they dehistoricize it, sub specie aeterni, when they turn it into a mummy. All that philosophers have handled for thousands of years have been concept mummies. Nothing real escaped their grasp alive. When these honorable idolaters of concepts worship something, they kill it and they stuff it. They threaten the life of everything they worship. So what he says here is that ideas actually emerge from experience, but then what philosophers do is they turn those living ideas, those living forms, if you like, that have the genuine content, that are only alive insofar as form and content are identical, into concept mummies, which then can be dehistoricized and controlled in this manner. Whatever has being does not become, whatever becomes does not have being. And so all of change, etc., must be killed off. They threaten, hence for Nietzsche, life itself. The concept, in fact, threatens life itself. So it isn't just an attack on Platonism or Plato. It seems it is really an attack on any sort of conceptualization, on any sort of concept building or concept making, concept formation, because that already threatens to stifle or suffocate or outright kill life itself, which is always historical, always, if you like, emerging, and of course also radically contingent. But since they, that is the philosophers, cannot grasp it, they look for reasons why it is kept from them. And I think by it he means being here. There must be an illusion, a deception at work, which prevents us from perceiving that which has being. Where is the deceiver hidden? We have found him, they cry happily. It is the senses, these senses which are so immoral in other ways as well, deceive us about the real world. And so history is nothing but belief in the senses, of course, belief in falsehoods, and hence they have to crowd out history. And the attempt by Silicon Valley, or let's say some, not all of Silicon Valley perhaps, but by certain forces within this strand that is called transhumanism, is to sell you a sort of fake or for transcendence that promises digital immortality by replacing your body with a different substrate, with a less weak substrate, which is, in their mind, simply put, the computer or the data center, which of course would mean that your self becomes a data heap itself. What remains of it, what is being uploaded, becomes part of the very machine that turns it into something to be harvested and to be controlled as well. What this, however, also, perhaps in a more deeper point, what this reveals is a deep hatred for history, of course, human life as such, or life as such. And this might also be the reason why so many AI data centers are being built, is ultimately the attempt to replace human beings so far as that is possible. And in that sense, there's a grand Egypticism at work here, at least if we follow how Nietzsche understands Egypticism. It's a sense of a mummification of life, a mummification of the soul. But here's the difference to the ancient Egyptians. For the ancient Egyptians, the mummy is the body mummified, but it serves as an anchor in the here and now, so that the spirit of the deceased can actually travel to the next world, to and through the afterlife. That's what the mummy is an anchor for. But here, what we might find, what Nietzsche sees in concept mummification, and what we can see in the attempt to mummify the self, is something else. It shall no longer serve as an anchor. It shall actually itself just become drained of its lifeblood, of its vital fluids, so that it can be turned into a controllable data set. That, I think, is the attempt ultimately of transhumanism. The other coin, the other side of transhumanism, is the very different approach, but ultimately it serves the same end, which is to say that we are now incapable, supposedly, of thinking as quickly as machines, and calculating as quickly as AI, etc. So the only thing that we can do now is extend our physical existence for hundreds of years, so that we can be, I don't know, sort of high level vegetables, and are in a sort of almost comatose life, but still our bodies extend beyond the reach, maybe also to be able to manage and steer some of the developments of AI. But AI is now, so the saying goes, on the other side of the very same coin of transhumanism, AI is now the steward of knowledge, or even wisdom, right? And we've heard all of these things, but ultimately these anti-life, these deeply anti-human, and basically all of life is the enemy here, because life is contingent, is historical, is embedded in its webs that are organically growing and emerging and shifting and changing, and that is what's supposed to be replaced by digital immortality. So even though perhaps not all philosophers hate becoming, certainly Aristotle doesn't, the very notion of dynamis and energeia, dynamis meaning potency or potentiality, energeia meaning actuality, the very enacting of the soul, for example, of the human being, is not the potentiality, but is the actuality, is the enacting of the potency that is the body. So the forms of your organs, the shape of your body, etc., that is ultimately, to simplify, that is the soul, and there's a coming together of being and becoming. And so that is what we need to keep in mind, that we cannot simply sort of, as Nietzsche does here, blame all of philosophy for what is occurring, but there is a certain misguided Platonism that is at work. And as the ideal world has collapsed, as Nietzsche might put it, or as Nietzsche did put it in The Twilight of the Idols, there is the moment of a great chance, a great opening, really, that he, however, sees also as perhaps a chance an occasion we don't really act upon. But instead, what we're trying to look for is still idealized model versions of the world in scientific models, for example, that try and serve as an anchor for the ephemera. And the ultimate promise of salvation, as this is where the neo-Christian element comes in, because in Plato there is no promise of salvation of the soul. There's rebirth of the soul. The soul travels, let's say, back to the ideas, remembers them, and then has to choose how to be reborn as an animal, be reborn as a noble man, be reborn as an ignoble man, etc. The myth of which is how the Politeia ends, is significant in this regard. So that, you could say, is a sort of form of becoming, even in Plato then. But the misguided Platonism that we have inherited that denies time, that wants to get rid of history, that Nietzsche sees, and even though it isn't fair to the Egyptians and it isn't fair to Plato and even Platonism, we can still use it as a heuristic to see what transhumanism is driving at. It's an anti-life, ultimately. It's a deeply anti-human, but it goes much further. It wants to eradicate life and replace it with the purely synthetic. And I think this is what drives so much of what's going on in AI, and attached to this is transhumanism. So thanks very much for listening. These are just some thoughts to get you to think about these things of what's going on. And if you'd like to read Nietzsche a bit further with me, do follow the link and take my course on Nietzsche's philosophy of life affirmation in the face of amor fati, in the face of what happens, in the face of suffering. And of course, also we address the eternal recurrence of the same, the will to power, and the Übermensch, creative life affirmation, etc. Or if you'd like to know more about Egyptian metaphysics, Egyptian cosmology, and what the mummy, for example, really was, take Carla Berenice's course on Egyptian cosmology. Follow the link. Again, thank you very much for listening, and share the video with anyone you know who might be interested in these topics. Thank you.